welcome everyone to the Library of Congress National Book Festival. You're here with me, Megan Halsband, Kat Fajardo, and Johnnie Christmas for You'll Be Okay, graphic novels about kids who keep going. I am the comic book reference specialist at the Library of Congress, so I have the great privilege of working with comic books for my job, which is pretty cool, but today we're going to chat with Kat and Johnnie about theirs. Just really quickly, want to thank the sponsors of the festival, the IMLS, the Washington Post, David Rubenstein, C-SPAN, AARP, GM, the James Madison Council, the John W. Kluge Center, the NEA, and the NEH. At the end of the event, there will be a Q&A session, so we'll make sure to leave time for that. Hold your questions till the end, and then directly after the talk today, we'll be doing a book signing with each of the authors just over there. So please join us after that if you'd like to continue the conversation. And so without further ado, welcome. So who wants to go first?
Not it. Okay, I'll go first. Hello, hi, my name is Kat Fajardo. I am the author and illustrator for Miss Quinces, or Señorita Quinces in Espanol. And it's a graphic novel about a young girl named Sue who would rather do anything else than celebrate her own quinceañera. Sue is just like any other teen, nerdy kid. All she wants to do is read comics and make comics at a sleepaway camp with her friends, and unfortunately that doesn't happen for her. Instead, she gets stuck going on a family trip to Honduras, where her mom is from, in order to visit relatives. And you know, they live out way in the country, which means no cable TV, no cell phone service, and no internet, which is a nightmare for a teen. So, and to make matters worse, Sue's mom suddenly announces that they're going to have a surprise quinceañera for her, which is the very last thing she wants. So, and you know, she and her mom strike a deal in order for her to continue her quinceañera planning. Her mom promises her that she'll be able to go to sleepaway camp with her friends at the end of summer, which is exactly what she wants. So, and of course, with a big family, especially if anyone is familiar with big Latina families, it gets kind of crazy. So yeah, it's just a coming-of-age story about family expectations, cultural traditions, and finding yourself, and you know and embracing what makes you different. So it's based on my own experience as a reluctant quinceañera, and yeah, I'm very excited for everyone to read it.
Hi everybody, my name is Johnnie Christmas. I'm an author of graphic novels for almost a decade now. And my new book is called Swim Team. It's about a young girl named Bree who moves to the town of Palmetto Shores, Florida with her father. And Palmetto Shores is swim crazy. Everyone loves swimming in this town, fanatical about it. But Bree has a secret. Bree doesn't know how to swim. So Bree does everything in her power to avoid the one elective that she does get, which is Swim 101. And after a near drowning occurs, Bree does, with the help of her neighbor, Miss Etta, take swim instruction and slowly starts the process of trying and failing and trying again to learn how to swim. And after that, she joins the middle school swim team. And she learns a lot of the lessons that young people learn through team sport, which is, you know, learning how to win gracefully and how to lose gracefully, and and putting 100% effort into the things that you apply yourself in. And of course, we learn the power of community, her getting to her relationship with her father, and the twists and turns that goes through with moving to a new town, friendship, and how that's tested by joining a team, and how that's, moving to a new school, and all the new challenges that Bree encounters. And the book came sort of out of my experience as a young person as well. When I was a kid, I almost drowned. And that set up a relationship with the water that is still not entirely comfortable. I've taken swim classes, and I technically know how to swim, but inside I'm still a little wary of it. I'll quickly tell you, like, how you train elephants. You take an elephant, and if it's you tie it to a very thin tree, and as the elephant grows, it still thinks it's a baby elephant, even though it's massive. It could pull that tree right out, right? So you could take a massive elephant and tie it to a little tree, and it won't move because that's how it was fixed from early experiences. So with swimming and lots of early experiences, these things can get set in. So I wanted to write Swim Team for the kid that I once was, and for kids who might be in the same situation, and to know that there is a way forward from troublesome childhood experiences and through friends, community, and family.
Very cool. Thank you. Well, so as we've talked about a little bit before we got here, I like to know the background of everything. So would you guys be willing to share a little bit about how you became a cartoonist and maybe a little bit about how you actually made the book?
Yeah. Should I go first? Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. Becoming a cartoonist, the way I think about it is that most children I know and most of the kids I grew up with drew and wrote stories and came up with stories even if they didn't write them down. And I find with a lot of cartoonists, we're just the ones who never stopped doing that. It's not, I think of it not so much as a process of becoming, it's just a process of whatever was the genesis of that process that happens with all of us as young people. It's a process that I'm still working through and working with right now, and I'm in dialogue with. And the process of making the comic book, let me see. It's a long process writing a comic book, but so it comes from you start with the genesis phase, and you kind of think about like, how do I make this entertaining? And then for me, I'll go into nuts and bolts. That maybe that's simpler. So I write a script. First I write an outline, and then I write a script, and then I rewrite that script until I can't stand looking at it anymore. And then kick it over to editorial, and they give notes, and then I'll probably write it again. And then after that, I pencil it, and then I do a final drawing, which is traditionally we use ink pens. This time I use digital. We call that an ink drawing. We call it inking. And then with Swim Team, we had a wonderful colorist, Hillary Jenkins, come in and do the colors. What was really interesting about Swim Team is that for the first time I did my drawings digitally instead of with a traditional ink pen to see if I can transition to a digital process. However, Hillary still colors traditionally with watercolors, acrylics, gouache, traditional media,
cool.
Which is wonderful with Swim Team. You can notice with like the light reflecting off the pool onto the characters and so on. So you've got this this marriage of digital, very up to the minute, drawing over very traditional, as old as watercolor. How old is that? Like hundreds of years old. Blended together to bring the story together in a visual way. And then of course letters by Chris Dickey. He came in after. I did the word balloons because I wanted to have the same kind of feel. But Chris Dickey did the wonderful placement of the words, and I put my balloons around where he thought best to place them.
So how many people here draw? Has everybody here made their own comic? Anyone? No? Maybe? Yes? Sort of? So something that sometimes people don't know, you may have done all of the parts of your comic, but a lot of comic books, like Johnnie was saying, are actually done by multiple artists.
Yes.
And so sometimes it's a writer and an illustrator and an inker and a colorist. And so some comic books can really be a team effort. In this case, you guys did most of the work yourselves, which is beautiful. And if you haven't had a chance to read it, I highly recommend. But I wanted to ask and see, because comic book making is kind of a process, and that's where what I actually like. I'm an artist too, so I would love to hear more about how you made the book, Kat. And so I actually managed to get it's a advanced copy, and there's no color in there. So that's kind of how it looks even before it gets colored. is it's just the lines and the black and the white and the inking and the text, and then somebody comes in and colors it, and then it looks beautiful and super dramatic. But
like
sorry,
no.
I interrupted you.
No, you're good. Yeah, no, it's good that you're showing that because so we had the colorist color the entire book at the very end, but the ARC usually has like the first few pages in color, which gives people a preview of what the whole book is going to look like. But I kind of like that it's in black and white because people can come in and like color it themselves, like a coloring book. So it's a win-win for everyone. But yeah, my process is very similar to yours. Just like just the concept stage, the inking, the script, and then the drawing and the inking. For me, the hardest part was the script phase because I'm so used to. So I've been doing comics for a while, and I usually collaborate with other writers, so I don't have to use the writing part of my brain. And so for Miss Quinces, I had to exercise that part of the brain. It was very painful. And when you're working with an editor, there's a process of like revisions, and then you get more feedback, and then you have to do more revisions. And so for me, that was the hardest part. But my favorite part was the inking process because you can just turn off your brain and just ink to your heart's content. But for this project, I also inked digitally, which was also a trial and error process because I love to ink traditionally with like a nib and ink and stuff. Yeah, it's just a good feeling, and it's really hard to replicate that onto the computer. But my process was very similar to Johnny's. So.
Yeah, inking is truly, for any of you who are making your comics or doing your drawings, a lot of times when I was a kid, I did with the pencil drawing, and I didn't do the ink drawing because I was afraid of messing up the drawing. Mm-hmm. But I encourage you to draw with an ink brush or a pen or a
even
nib.
a Sharpie too.
Or even a Sharpie. Yeah. It's so much fun.
It is. It really is.
I first met you, Kat, at the Small Press Expo, and so some of what you guys get to do a whole huge cool book, but I don't know, Johnnie, did you start doing like mini comics like I encountered with Kat, or have you always just done gigantic books?
Well, I started doing monthly comics, so more genre type stuff. The first book I did was one called Shelter. Then I worked with so that was, I did like a crime book, then I did a sci-fi book with Margaret Atwood, and did so I was doing monthly comics for a time. So there were 20-page chunks, so they weren't as small as say a mini comic, but they were still pretty bite-sized. Mm-hmm. But they were on a monthly schedule, so it was kind of a marathon.
Yeah. The library actually has one of the largest comic book collections in the world, in case you didn't know that. And so we have graphic novels like this, but we also have mini comics and monthly comics too. And so that is what I get to work with and what I love. But it's really cool to be able to hear about how it all kind of comes together, because I don't have the stamina to actually put an entire comic book together.
It's very hard.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
But it is really cool in the end. So I actually wanted to ask you a little bit about, is there something that you hope people take away from your book, or is there something in particular that you hope people can see in the book when they're reading it?
Okay. I mean, I've met a lot of people who didn't know what like quinceañeras were, and were not part of that culture. So hopefully with my book, they get to get a general idea of what it entails, but also for those who have not gone to quinceañera, it's like a big celebration to celebrate a young girl's 15th year, and it's a huge deal because it's like a big party. There's also a church ceremony as well, because it's basically a way to symbolize a young girl becoming a woman, but then also embracing the religious part of the ceremony as well. And so it's a whole big deal. You wear a big poofy dress. You invite all your family members, up to like 200 folks. Like it's a lot. And so a lot of people also who've had quinceañeras didn't want one as well. So we don't really see a lot of stories about that. And I was one of those kids where I didn't want a quinceañera because I was like a goth emo kid, and I'm just like, I don't want to wear pink. Like, I don't want this party. But in the end, I'm glad I did, because I, realized it's such a beautiful celebration, especially with family and friends, and just like the symbology as well of community, because that's what the quinceañera is about. It's everyone coming together to celebrate this, this special day. And, I have we had uncles and aunts bringing food, and like neighbors coming over to set up, and it's just like everyone is invited. So it was nice, and I wanted to show that through in my book, but also like showing a protagonist who doesn't feel like they belong and just feel like the black sheep of the family. That's a feeling I had growing up, especially being like a queer kid as well. So I wanted to show that through my main character Sue. But yeah, I just hope people get that from my book.
There was I don't want to give any spoilers away, but there was a part in there that my very like Converse and Doc Marten loving teenage self was very excited by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that part too.
Sorry. And Johnnie, you talked a little bit about your experience with growing up and not knowing how to swim and some other things. Would you mind touching on some of the other takeaways, I guess, that you're hoping that maybe people get from your book?
Sure. One of the things that I would like people to take away from the book is that sometimes, even if things are scary or hard, and if that trying them is the first step, and that first time you try anything, you're not going to be perfect at it. You might not even be good at it. You might actually even be terrible at it. But through iteration, repetition, and you will get better at everything you put your hand to, especially if you apply effort. So that's the one thing that when I was a kid, I had this idea that I was terrible at math, and it was only at the end of my high school career that I realized, oh, I'm not bad at math. I'm just not trying. And when I actually started trying, I was like, oh, wow, oh, right. This isn't as terrible as I thought. It actually makes a lot of sense. Actually, it's quite pleasurable because it all adds up, literally and, figuratively. And so that's one of the things that I hope folks take away from it, to try and try again. And but as for my situation, not knowing how to swim as a kid, when I was a kid, I thought not knowing how to swim was a personal failing, something that I had done or something. I didn't realize that I don't build swimming pools at 5 years old, and I don't decide where they are put. And there were no swimming pools in my neighborhood growing up, and that it was simply a matter of access. When we don't all remember when we learned how to walk, those of us who are able to walk, because we had so much access to it that it just So when you're a young person and you get your access to swimming very early on, by the time you become an adult or a older young person, it's something that you've had reliable access to, and you just simply get better and better at it. Versus the first time you encounter a swimming pool and you're a lot older, that could be quite catastrophic if you aren't there with in a safe environment. So that's a long way of answering, but yeah, I hope iteration, I think, is the main thing I hope people take away from, and proper perspective if available. Sometimes things aren't up to you, but wherever you're standing from, you can take the next best step to make things better.
I like that, next best step. I was a very early swimmer personally, but it does take practice, and it does take repetition, and and I think even with anything, but cartooning too, drawing, as you practice and do it over and over and over again, that's something that you just get better at, and that's actually something that I've noticed a lot of cartoonists do, and you guys might do too, is you just keep drawing this, drawing, and eventually one day you feel like, oh, there's this thing, and it actually doesn't look so bad, and you can be kind of excited about that. So did you go to library? I'm gonna switch it to books and libraries now because I'm a librarian and this is the National Book Festival. So did you guys go to libraries a lot when you were a kid? Did you read graphic novels in libraries when you were a kid, or comic books? How did you first come across some of those when you were a kid?
Yeah, I was a library kid. I was obsessed with the I Spy books, and then that eventually went on over to chapter books, like Junie B. Jones and the Magic was a Treehouse, those kind of books. And I would beg my mom to take me to like the library on the weekends because we couldn't do it during the weekdays, and that was fun. And it wasn't until in the 90s we had like the Tokyo Pop like manga craze that I discovered manga. And at the time it was just like one shelf at the library, not even, just like half of a shelf. And now kids have like a whole row of manga and comics, and during my days we didn't have that. So it's great to see kind of how libraries and even bookstores evolved over time to have that accessibility for like comics. And I wish I had like a swim team growing up. Like, I think that's why we make graphic novels, because like you said, we create work that we wanted to see and read as a child. So
I used to love libraries as a kid. I used to kind of haunt them. There was this one, I grew up in Miami, Florida, and there was a library that was like maybe a 10-15-minute walk away called the North Dade Regional Library. And it was a massive building. It was like probably the biggest building I'd been in as a kid. So I just, not only did I love the enormity of the space, I love the quiet of it. It was this quiet place with all these books, and you had so much access to it, and you were free to roam the shelves and just grab whatever you like and sit down and read. It was, as a kid, it was a very liberating experience that I had free access to choose my own adventure. And then, we had a bunch of great libraries, and when I went to art school in New York, we had lots of wonderful libraries there as well. So, but my entry into comics, my dad used to grab these, used to have spinner racks at the old 7-Eleven where they would have comic books, and my dad, he would just grab some on his way home. He would just grab whatever comic and he would just hand me some. And I loved them because they were totally out of a sequence or whatever. Like, it'd be Flash 102 today, and then 2 weeks from now it was like Flash 170 or what, and it was like it was totally out of sequence or whatever. But I really loved the drawings. I really loved what was happening. I loved the adventure, and that sort of started me on the road to loving comics. But I always thought of them, I didn't think of them as something that someone made. I always thought of them as kind of like a chair or something. Like, this kid, you just think they just exist. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I started noticing the distinctive differences between different artists. And I was thinking, oh, that's made by a person. And then slowly I was like, wait, I can be that person. Like, I can be that person. And that really sharpened my focus into like, okay, I think not only am I gonna apply myself to art, but I'm gonna apply myself to comic books in this longer narrative form of storytelling.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, I remember the discovery of like different artists for the same series. I'm just like, why did they draw it that way? I guess they're trying to spice things up or something. It's very strange.
Some people get very attached to a certain style in comics, and so I know that there are groups that read specific comics and then they have very strong debates over like whose art style they like better and like what storyline they think is more interesting. And so, for me, the comics and comic books kind of are a really great example of the theme of the book festival this year, which is books bring us together. And I think both of your books are kind of really great examples of that, because you're talking about your own lived experiences and about your childhood experiences, and then welcoming in kids who are reading them now who may have had the same experiences. And so I really enjoyed reading your books, and I think at this point we've kind of talked about a lot of stuff, but maybe now we want to hear some questions from the audience. So I believe there is a microphone, maybe?
Yes?
over here. So we welcome anybody to come up and ask questions.
I love the height of these microphones, by the way. They are so they're so adorable, just at the right height. So please
I know
step forward.
It's a little
guys,
scary, but come
ask
up.
anything. Ask us anything.
Yeah.
We're curious. Yes.
What's your favorite color?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I guess mine would be orange and pink.
I would say red and black.
Black.
Yeah, it's such a. What's yours?
Yeah, what's yours? Black and
All right,
blue.
right
That's
on.
a black combo.
Do you have any suggestions for the kids in the crowd that want to become writers?
Ooh,
Well, I may have phrased it wrong, but
No, not at all.
something like that.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Suggestions for being a writer? I would say start with something that you're curious about. That's how I start every story. I just write actually a list of all the things that I'm curious about, and then the thing that I'm most curious about, I just start asking what if. Like I like dinosaurs. What if a dinosaur lived in a skyscraper? I don't know. All right. So then what? And then what? And then what? The next thing you know, if your then whats are very short, you just might have a joke, you know. But if it's very long, you might have a graphic novel. You know, if it keeps giving rise to new situations and scenarios.
Yeah, or even like writing fanfics if you're very attached to a particular series, like animation or movie or something. Writing fanfic of like, what if this character did this instead? Like those are always really fun to read as well. So again, yeah, you have to have like the passion for the story. I always carry around a notebook too. That helps whenever inspiration strikes you.
Yeah. Thank you.
And have fun with it.
Yeah.
Hi.
Do you have any advice of becoming a graphic novelist?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say writing and drawing constantly. Again, if there's something, an idea that you have that you always wanted to do, you can start small by doing a short comic or something, like a 3-panel or something, and then just making sure there's a middle, a beginning, middle, and end, and yeah, just having fun with it. Yeah.
Yeah, just start with something that you find interesting, because there are rules, but there are really no rules. The only rule is to keep your reader interested. So if you have a sibling or a cousin, if they are really interested in what you're doing, you've done it, you know. So just keep writing, keep drawing, and if it's interesting, you've done it properly.
Thank you.
Well,
Of course.
What's your favorite superhero?
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man
I
is a
agree.
good one. Yep.
End of discussion.
That's it. Are you in agreement with this?
Oh yeah, I'm from New
Spider-Man?
York, so like I had to say Spider-Man.
Okay. Yes.
Hi. I apologize if you already made this clear, but how much work do you put into storyboarding? Or do you storyboard?
I feel like thumbnailing is a form of storyboarding. It's where for those of you who don't know, thumbnailing is basically planning out how a page would look like. So instead of drawing like a huge page, you kind of draw an idea of it. Like it can be this small as long as you know what's going to be on each page. It can be stick figures. It can be as long as you know what's happening. And so for thumbnails, it usually takes me for like an entire book about like 2 months, 3 months. And that's with revisions, because I would send it to my editor, and they would be like, "Oh, like I don't understand what's happening here," or like, "Why don't we try, paneling this way instead?" And so that's with revisions and feedback. But was that the same?
Yeah, same. About the same amount of time too.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, it takes quite a bit of time but I don't know if this is the same for you, but as an artist, as I'm scripting, I can almost see it visually. So it's almost like a first pass at thumbnails, but then it really doesn't become real until you put it on the page and see how it works. But it takes some time. So it can move very quickly until you hit a snag, and then you rework it and try to make sure you're visually telling the story the best way possible.
Yeah, and everyone's process is different. I know people who would thumbnail like within a month or like weeks or like almost a year. So like it really depends on how you work.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Hi.
Hi.
How do you decide what to write about?
That's a good question.
I start with whatever I'm curious about,
Yeah.
like truly.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah. Yeah, of course. Pretty much.
Yeah.
How long did it take you to write the books, and how many tries did it take you to finally publish it?
Ooh, that's a good question.
That's a good question. It depends because sometimes so there's a process where it's called the pitching process, and you basically send your idea to like a publisher so that they can, to see if they're interested in publishing it. But sometimes it can get rejected depending on, whether the like editor like doesn't like see themselves working with that idea, or even if like the editor does love it, but then someone else says in the publisher like, no, we can't work with that, or we're not interested. So it really depends. But in my experience for Ms. Quinces, I guess like the pitching process took about like 6 months, just like sending it to different publishers, and then the writing part took about, I want to say like 5 to 6 months. Yeah, because that process is very slow to me. And also like revisions, if I need to change things in the story. I think I had like about 5 rounds of revisions. It was just a lot. But yeah, it takes some time, depending on, again, the artist and the author. Everyone has a different process, but what was yours like?
Yeah, pretty much the same. It took a long time of pitching ideas to publishers, et cetera. But with Swim Team, I had a very short window. I think it was about like a year and a half. So it was all very condensed. So I think I took maybe like, oh boy, writing maybe like 3 months. And then drawing was like maybe like 4, 5, 6. I forget. It all happened during the pandemic. So it was, we are still living in the pandemic, but during the height of the lockdowns, it was when most of the drawing happened. So it was a very condensed schedule, but I had a lot more time available to do it. So I'd say about a year with this one, but I don't know if that's typical.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Does a project ever get old? And if so, how do you stick with it?
That's a great question.
That's a really good question.
Oh, goodness.
Ooh, hitting with the hard ones.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes they do get old, and sticking with it is almost like a. If you find that it's getting old before you start, then you should stop and find something else that you have a passion for, that you're really interested in, you're really curious about. But if you're in it and it's already begun and it's too late, then that's where you just kind of rely on reserves of fortitude, and you just try and, it's like running a marathon. It hasn't happened a lot in my career, but it does happen.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Why did you choose a female main character?
That's a really good question. For me personally, so as you can see, Suyapa kind of looks like me. That's because Suyapa is me. It was going to be a autobiographical work, so it was going to be about my experience as a quinceañera, but because I changed things around and I wasn't comfortable with having my family in there without their permission, I changed some things around, so it became a semi-autobiographical work, so it's still true, but also not. But I still had Suyapa as the main character, and of course, it's based on my own experience. So it felt more natural that way.
And for me, I'm very shy about putting, actually I did a first version that starred me, but it was only for my friends to see. And then I created Bree for a whole different story, a whole different thing. And then as I was reformulating it, I thought, I really loved the character of Bree, and I thought, well, what if Bree was in this situation? What would she do? And then the book just started like unfolding at that point. At that point, I was like, wow, it's like a runaway horse. Let me put Bree in the situation and let Bree take it on from here.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll end for today.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
When you're going to write a story, would you say that you first write like what the words would be and then pictures? Or would you say you make drawings and then you write off of that?
What's your process?
Question of the century. I always get this question. I was just like,
It's a good one.
yeah, it really is.
Chicken or egg?
Chicken or egg? I guess since I'm a visual person, when I'm writing the script, like Johnnie said, I envision what the scene would look like, and then as I'm writing that script, I take a moment to like draw it out. So it's kind of a little bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people in our line of creativity that are visual people, so sometimes they'll write visually first. So there's no wrong way to do it. But for me, I remember with my creativity, it was interesting. I think the word and the image came around the same time. So I write it down first, but I do see it. So there's no wrong way. I know people who do really great work who start with the drawings and then go in after. So whatever feels the best for you, start that way, and and then you could also do both.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you for
so
your
much
question.
for joining us. I'm sorry we have to wrap it up.
Yeah, and any other questions, you could
Yep.
ask us in the signing line.
We will be over that way in the signing lines shortly. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Johnnie, for
Thanks, man.
coming. I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation, and thank you for coming to the National Book Festival.